Shadow Show.
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 Shadowing it.
Billy, what's your problem with George Brett?
What's my problem with George Brett?
Wow.
That's why I directed the question right at you. There was no confusion about where the question was headed. It was, Billy, what's your problem with George Brett?
He did say Billy.
Really, no need to repeat my question there.
Well, I don't have a problem with him, but America has a problem with the fact that George Brett is being showed more than the baseball games are in this situation. So you're watching the games, but you're really watching a George Brett interview that's being interrupted with, playoff baseball, which, by the way, let's play a game called Toss Out the Stats.
Oh, I love that game.
So toss out the George Brett stats. You know what I mean? Toss out the 305 career average, the 3,100 hits that he has. Toss out the MVP that he had. Toss out the Gold Glove he can keep, but toss all that out.
I'm tossing it all out. Yep.
Yeah, toss it all out. Toss out the 13 All-Star games.
Right.
Toss out the Silver Sluggers. Toss out the 1,500 RBIs.
Are we tossing out the World Series?
Toss out the World Series.
Okay.
You let him keep the Gold Gloves,
He
though.
could keep that one.
No one cares.
You could just say toss it out once and then list a bunch
Yeah,
of
but
things.
that would not be the efficient Billy that we've come to know and love.
Well, toss out those stats. What has he done?
Got angry at an umpire during the
Exactly
prime time.
right.
That's
A
it.
temper
That's
tantrum.
it.
You
Yep.
toss out all the stats. What has he done? Just really a temper tantrum. So why are we dedicating so much time to him? The Gold Glove he can keep, and this is the bone that I would pick with the Gold Glove that he won in 1985.
Pick that bone.
In 1985, that's when the Gold Glove meant something, okay? Gold Glove doesn't mean anything anymore. Wow. Back then, the 1980s, that was prime Gold Glove season, and he only won one. Wow. That's when you need to start racking up the Gold Gloves. You only win one Gold Glove in the 1980s. Are you a Hall of Famer?
Right.
And we toss out all the other stats. What has he actually done?
How many Gold Gloves did Ozzy win?
Great question. The Wizard.
Yeah.
Roy just whispered in my ear something that was very weighty and baritone. He just said hemorrhoids. And
He had hemorrhoids?
yes, George Brett
Toss him out.
famously had hemorrhoids.
Hard to do.
All right, Roy.
Can you guys tell me, please, why does one pick at a bone? I don't know why bones are indeed picked.
Because there's still meat on the bones.
Yeah.
Yep.
We got to get it.
the meat off.
I also wonder why we use the phrase sneeze at it. Like, there's nothing to sneeze at.
I was wondering about that earlier this week. I actually wrote it down because someone said or started to say that something was nothing to sneeze
Were you
at.
listening to the big dog on the way in today, too?
No.
Oh,
It was
wow.
Kim Bocamper that I heard say it.
No, I heard it
What
2
a
days
show.
on our show. Bo Camper was on today?
Oh, he's on every Thursday with the big dog.
Oh, Power Hour. I mean, wow.
Kim Bo Camper and Joe Rose were on this morning?
Yep.
Yep.
Together.
Talking about how great traffic was.
It's a throwback to when Gold Gloves meant something.
Put it on the poll at Le Batard Show. Did Gold Gloves really mean something back in 1985? And also, I wanted to ask all of you, because I think the reason they're talking to George Brett all the time is because they're trying to figure out ways to talk about the Kansas City Royals. And I want to ask all of you, who is the second most famous Kansas City Royal?
Hal Morris.
Patrick Mahomes.
Tom
Wow.
McRae.
Eric Hosmer.
I would say Buddy Biancalana.
All right. Good talk.
Sal Perez is
Sal
he a Royal?
Perez is, he's always going to be a
He's
Royal.
still there.
He's still
Yeah,
there.
he'll be there in
Dude.
2040.
That's the one I know, Dano.
I had that moment like 3 weeks ago. I'm like, Salvador Perez is still
Still
catching,
held-
and
still
he's
hitting
catching.
homers.
and he's
Yeah.
like 31. Yeah.
Usually they're at first base by now.
He's
those
still
catchers.
young, too.
Stop that. Stop that. Stop that.
I hear him chat to the noise, move too quick, can't stop for the talking. I hear him chat with the walking. Just too sharp with the prize. White girls let it tell me I'm awesome, yeah. Hot like fire on the pan. If you wanna touch my please use caution.
Cold like 0 degrees. I'm out the cage, gotta let out the beast. Revolutionary, gotta let out the streets. Locked in a cage, I'ma let out the sheets. We came for one man, forget my peace. We take the west side, take on the east. I'ma put them in the cage, never let out the.
I hear him chat to the noise, move too quick, can't stop for the talking. I hear him chat with the boys, not so tough when mans keep walking, yeah. Just too sharp with the prize. White girls let it tell me I'm awesome, yeah. Hot like fire on the pan. If you wanna touch me, please use caution.
Stop that. Stop that. Stop that.
Stugotz comes waddling in today and by way of greeting before good morning says to me, you want terrible things to happen to the climate.
I mean, you put yourself there, not me. You have positioned yourself as the guy who was rooting for a city to fall into the ocean. I mean,
I am not rooting for that in any way. I am.
Dan, if a city would fall into the ocean, it would make your argument stronger. Ipso facto, everybody be listening to you more on climate stuff instead of yawning.
And it would make you right, which is, as you know, the most important thing.
Yep.
I would say the preserving of life is slightly more important than me being right.
How slightly we talking?
Put it on the poll at Le Batard Show. Would Dan value being right over people dying? At Le Batard Show.
What if we got both? What if like it became an Atlantis situation where a city magically then became underwater, but that people like grew gills and they could live in it?
I really
Billy Gills.
don't understand what you guys think I'm being right or wrong about when there were 17 tornadoes yesterday. I'm not making up that number. That's the number. And the weather center here that's always giving severe weather warnings gave more of them yesterday than they ever have, and we're the unscathed part of Florida. Like, basically nothing happened. I drove down here, and there wasn't rain. There was a lot of branches in the streets and stuff, but South Florida or the places I was in, I don't know if you guys were affected in any way. There was some wind and some things knocked over on my balcony, but it was very mild compared to the roof blowing off of Tropicana Field. And I have no idea what's coming in the coming days of whatever it is that Sarasota is going to look like once we have something more than drone footage.
We got away easy. South Florida did, no question about it. The drive in today was a breeze. I'm saying, like Dan, the easiest drive I've ever had. But we were lucky, and we do have no idea because when you're watching that hurricane coverage where they can't take you to because the water has mounted up so high, they can't take you really inside the streets that have been flooded. And so we have no idea, to your point, actually, what happened and how bad it was for the rest of the state. I'm assuming, though, that it was pretty bad.
I have a pretty good idea. I've got some of the footage I've seen. When I went to bed last night, more than 2.3 million people had lost power. So at the very least, some people are going to be inconvenienced. And I assume there will be death. And I don't want to undersell warnings about death, as I feel like I'm, living in the middle of unprecedented climate times, because you guys tell me if you have seen that many tornadoes in South Florida. I'm sitting here worried about hurricanes. I'm worried about wind and flooding, and here are tornadoes all of a sudden that I just hadn't accounted for that are just sort of coming in before the hurricanes do. Have you guys seen that before? Like, I've seen
not that number of
occasional tornadoes,
right.
not
that many,
not 17 of them.
Yeah, I always know that tornadoes are associated with hurricanes. I think they were saying they hadn't really documented this many associated with a named storm hitting Florida.
I think the thing, too, is like actually seeing the tornado, right? Like we hear about tornadoes like, oh, there was a tornado in West Hollywood. And you're like, oh, okay, whatever. But when you see the visual of it down I-75 and it's an actual tornado, like if it's from Twister, that's where I feel like I haven't seen those before here.
I associate that, and I know there are tornado warnings and severe weather warnings all the time in South Florida, but I associate that with a different part of the country. This is not. I also don't associate generally with hurricanes forming this way, this quickly, and doing what this one did in the Gulf of Mexico, where it flies from Mexico over to the west coast of Florida. Like, that's not something.
Yeah, west to east, generally not the move.
That I'm used to seeing as well. But I'm curious about this part of it for many people who don't want to hear me talk about climate anymore and want to hear me talk even less about politics. So I'm in the middle of this yesterday, and I'm watching on television as Joe Biden is really struggling to just read. Like, really struggling. Cannot make me feel soothed at all that I've got the leadership that I need during a time of crisis, as he's yelling about Marjorie Taylor Greene saying that they are controlling the weather. So I assume the they is the transgender. I'm not sure all the time, but they are controlling the weather, and that
No,
I
don't think it was transgender.
I know, Mike.
Yeah.
I know.
Oh, okay.
I know. And
Well, I'm sorry. We
Joe Biden is saying
spring into action here.
We
Joe
don't
Biden
know. Yeah.
is saying that is ridiculous and stupid, and I feel not soothed at all by the fact that he can't read. He's old and he's tired, and he can't soothe me at all.
He can read. He's just struggling to read with age. Let's be clear. I mean, the guy can read.
Stugotz, in a time of crisis, when I'm looking for the soothing of leadership, he was
Right.
having all sorts of difficulties with speaking words that he was trying to read. But this as Donald Trump is on the Flagrant podcast with Andrew Schultz, and they're running circles around him, just laughing in his face is all they're doing. And our leadership has to go on this podcast in order to try to appeal to a younger demo. And look at what happens here. This is what our leadership is doing as Florida is being assaulted on all sides by weather that is, bought by the oil companies.
I have a hard time doing it to them because I'm basically a truthful person, but and frankly,
It's a qualifier of basically, right? You have a lot of caveats there. You have a lot of room for explanation, a lot of room for exploratory measures.
Just laughing in his face, man. That office used to mean something before he disgraced it this way. Like going on with podcasters so they can laugh in your face about being truthful? That's unbelievable that a guy with that mustache would laugh in your face about who you are.
Whoa, relax on the mustache.
Do you not feel like you're in the middle of something that you have not seen before? Yes or no?
I've seen bad leadership, and I've seen storms hit Florida. And I've seen those two things happen simultaneously. So I don't think this is unprecedented.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I've never seen a guy hit so many big home runs than Francisco Lindor. I mean, I am in the middle of something special.
Do you think you can? You think you could recognize a picture of him now?
I don't know.
Francisco Lindor, the coolest thing to me about that Grand Slam yesterday is the way that he rounded the bases as if he expected it.
Confidence.
He was so bad for them last year. He's been so bad for them since signing that contract. And Francisco Lindor hit an enormous home run. He feels like the MVP of the league ever since they moved him to the leadoff spot. And he hit it with such a relaxed Stugotz emotion.
Yes.
When he's rounding the bases, and I'm expecting, Stugotz, you've seen this from Pete Alonso and others. They hit the big home runs, and they round the bases with a great deal of emotion. And Francisco Lindor rounded these bases as if this was the most casual stroll and unexpected thing he's ever seen, as the announcers do all the Hispanic for him.
Viene Esteve, lanzamiento, saca batazo, peligroso, profundo para el central, la pelota está tomando altura, de locura en el City Field, recogiendo porque los Mets, Paquito Lindor, con las bases llenas.
Feel that's cheating at the end to just sort of sing your way out of the call.
What happened to the Dracula guy? Is that the same guy or is that a different guy?
Different guy.
Lindor's been okay since he became a Met. First year he was actually pretty good, but he did round the bases like he expected that from himself with max confidence. It was great to see, and somehow the Mets are this lovable, scrappy underdog with the highest payroll in baseball.
Stugotz, Lindor, since he's been there, since signing that contract, has been a far lesser player than the one that he was in Cleveland until the last 3 months.
Well, what he's done the last 3 months is legendary. What he's done the last 3 weeks is legendary. He was top 10 in MVP voting last year, though. Dan, he was. He won a Silver Slugger. I mean,
look at how his career started with the Mets and what it is that he was struggling with and what it is that they thought they were buying when they brought him over, because he has been the face of their underachievement before this recent success. And I'm a little floored to see him rounding the bases as if they're just getting started in New York with this stuff. How do you guys feel about seeing Giancarlo Stanton behind only Babe Ruth in terms of number of home runs he hits per at-bats in the postseason. He's 1 home run every 9 at-bats in the postseason. Only Babe Ruth is better in the history of the postseason.
It just shows how stupid baseball stats are and how you can manipulate the numbers to tell you anything is the greatest thing you've ever seen. Like last week or the week before, we were saying Pete Alonso hit one of the greatest home runs in the history of baseball.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were outside at the table today before the show just talking about the Mets, and they were saying Francisco Lindor's home run was better than Pete Alonso's home run. So, like, in a week and a half, the Mets are single-handedly sweeping out all of the historic home runs in baseball history in the eyes of people watching the postseason right now, which is just an incredible. I would urge everyone who's missing the postseason, tune in, because what we're watching right now, in the eyes of the people who sit in the table outside, are the greatest things that have ever happened in the history of the game.
Guys, starting to watch a little postseason baseball, now getting into it. Okay,
Now's the time.
Saw the most baseball I've seen all season. Saw the first 3 innings of Dodgers, Padres, Dano. Shohei Ohtani. Whoa. Dan, before last night, 14 of 17 with runners in scoring positions. 15 of 17 hit a nice little.
Well, it wouldn't be 14 of 17 and then 15 of 17.
15
it would have to be
innings.
15
Hard to
of
do,
18.
yeah.
You know, that kind of thing.
There's a walk in there. Sometimes that doesn't count. Tony, get this.
Yeah, bats. Yeah.
Shohei pitches also.
No, I know that. He had a little Tommy John, which is why he couldn't pitch.
A little
Tommy John. Little Tommy John. Not a big Tommy John.
Little
Tommy John.
talk that
little
he may,
one.
Just a little Tommy John.
may make an appearance this postseason. Keep an eye.
Billy, do me the favor when going through all of baseball history not to just quote the Fuentes brothers as
Ethan was involved in this
as
too.
the people who can tell you that the Lindor home run in the 6th inning is bigger than the Alonso one that ended up being unlike any homer in the history of the sport, and we're saying it was one of the biggest home runs in Mets history, not one of the biggest home runs ever. Those are two very
Not what that
different
table
things.
was saying.
Yeah, I know.
Dan, you do it in New York, it automatically becomes one of the biggest home runs in baseball history. That's how it works.
Yeah, I mean Joe Carter, that guy. He did it in Canada. So
Yeah, but
nobody-
they weren't
it doesn't count,
losing.
yeah.
They
You're
weren't
the only
down
one
at the
who
time,
remembers that.
if you remember correctly.
Okay, Stugotz, go ahead and give me all the biggest home runs in New York history. Can you give them all to me, please?
All the ones Lindor has hit in the last 2 weeks and Peter
Yeah,
Alonso's.
go ahead, give me all the others. I'm waiting for them.
You want Yankees and Mets, or you just want Mets?
Regular season count, because Cliff Floyd had one in there.
You're saying
Right.
that the only home runs that matter are home runs that are hit in New York.
Yes.
I want you to give me all
Aaron
these
Boone.
home runs that you're speaking of. I know. I'm filibustering for you so you have time to think of them.
The Mick in the 55 playoffs
Oh, yeah.
against, I think it wasn't the Red Sox. I can't remember who he hit it
Yeah.
against, but it doesn't matter. He hit it in New York. Yeah.
I don't think you have
55
the,
playoffs.
You don't
Look it
have
up.
the year right.
Look it up. I
Can
mean,
you
you
guys
asked,
look
I gave you an answer.
Look this up
I
for
mean,
me. But the problem is
Sounds right.
Didn't Joe DiMaggio hit one that landed on a subway or something and never landed technically, so it went 8,000 feet?
Of course, Reggie, Mr. October, had 3 homers in a World Series game.
yeah.
And
Chris
he-
Chambliss.
Chris Chambliss, great first baseman.
Marked down as a great dismissal. Roy offering up Joe Carter and Stugotz saying, "You're the only one that remembers that."
Not a single American remembers that.
The Piazza home run post 9/11.
That's a huge one. By the way, quick update on the Mick. 1955 playoffs, he was hurt, which is why the Brooklyn Dodgers were able to win.
That's why. Mick wasn't playing. Check 56, Tone. Check
Okay,
56.
yeah.
Get my years mixed up.
Yeah. The Mick is what he just wanted to say. He didn't know the year, the home run, the series, the opponent, the city. He didn't know anything. He didn't get anything right except the Mick. That's all he had in the holster. People are mad. Another one of these subjects, Stugotz, that agitates me because I perpetually am bothered by the way in modern times the expertise or the resume of truly historic people is sort of dismissed by people who arrive Johnny-come-lately and will tell you that they are really mad right now at the way that Bob Costas calls baseball games. The internet is furious. Bob Costas made a couple of mistakes last night. One of them was having a single that he called that wasn't a single because it was caught by the shortstop. And I suffer a little bit when Al Michaels is one of the great broadcasters of all time. He's also in his 80s. And his lack of enthusiasm on calls is something that people are noticing on Amazon as he's getting paid a lot of money. We do not allow many of these people to age with grace or on their terms. ESPN does a good job of it with Dick Vitale and with Lee Corso, but mostly we'll run you out of the game. And so, Billy, what's been happening here on the internet with Bob Costas? Because for the last couple of years, people are really bothered by the way he's calling baseball games when he's always been a great baseball broadcaster, by consensus, by other broadcasters who are great at broadcasting.
Well, he's been really bad this series. Like, he sounds bored at times. He seems to openly be rooting for the Yankees at other times. People are not happy with Bob Costas and his general lack of enthusiasm, his, perceived biases, which, by the way, we can all agree Bob Costas, if we go back in time, was rooting against the Marlins in 1997. It was rooting
Yes,
for
he
Cleveland.
was.
I don't think there's anyone on earth that can argue the opposite of that. Everybody knows that Bob Costas was rooting against the Marlins because he's this hoity-toity baseball purist that didn't want a team in teal to be winning a championship, and he didn't want a team in Miami winning a championship. So that's just, I'd love to feel bad for old Bobby, but I don't, because of the way that he brutally treated my Marlins in 1997. He has what's coming to him. I thought when he got double pink eye that's what, his punishment was going to be for being so biased and so brutal and so nasty to the Marlins, but no. Now it's this, a public downfall, and I couldn't be happier.
He has what's coming to him. Wow.
Yeah, what? Did I say something wrong?
He treated the Marlins poorly.
Yeah, that one time, and I'm sure every other team out there can say the same thing about Bob Costas.
A lot of people feel this way. And
a little humility goes a long way, Bobby.
That was said in a way that didn't feel humble, calling him Bobby. Like
Really?
that, yeah. It
I wouldn't
feel
say it wasn't humble. I'd say it wasn't respectful.
Okay. I mean, they feel
Fair.
similar. They feel calling Bob Costas Bobby.
I'm sure he was called Bobby in grade school. If anything, I'm reaching out to him as a friend, I would say.
Mm-hmm. So 65 years ago, you're referring to him as when he was 7 years old instead of 72.
Yeah, you don't think... Actually, you know what? If we're going to be honest, Bob Costas, when he was a child, made people call him Robert, right? Yeah. Like, for sure. Like, Robert Q. Costas or whatever his middle name is. 100%. He never wanted to be Bobby. I'm surprised he even allows people to call him Bob.
Put it on the poll, please, Juju, at Le Batard Show. In grade school, did Bob Costas make the other kids call him Robert? Because this is part of what it is that's happening about people enjoying the downfall. People enjoying the criticism of this person. I'm always confused. I don't think you've heard. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is this? Have you guys heard me do a lot of criticizing of broadcasting and broadcasters? Like over the years, have you heard me get insane with anger at the way someone is calling a game? Because broadcasters are somehow some of the most polarizing, hated figures in sports. Joe Buck, I don't even get it. I have no understanding of how it is people feel about Joe Buck.
The problem with you is you watch all these games on mute, so you're not listening to the broadcasters. So therefore, why would you rip a broadcaster? Yeah. I mean, sound down.
Baby.
Yeah.
I did run Tony Fiorentino.
You guys got that guy fired.
Out of the Heat organization.
It
it wasn't you guys.
He's still there, by the way.
It was just
the
me.
coach is still there.
Yeah, he's a community leader.
Yeah, he's coaching.
He'll always be there.
Clinics,
Community
though.
outreach.
He's not doing
Family.
any
Give him
of
back
the
to the kids.
broadcasting. That's a good one. That I did actually get mad at Tony Fiorentino quite a bit. You got me cornered on that one. That is one that I did get angry about.
Other side of the coin, big Tommy Tide guys. Yeah. Huge.
Yeah.
I've been trying to reach Reese Davis all week to talk about the shift that he pulled last Saturday, Cal and the University of Miami, where he worked from, I'm guessing, before 4 a.m. I think that he was probably up earlier than 4 a.m.
You're right. They had a 2:30 a.m. call time local.
Damn.
So 2:30 a.m. and then he's calling from 7 to 10 p.m. West Coast time, Pacific time. He's then calling the University of Miami game because was it Dave Fleming?
Yeah, he
called
found out
sick?
like essentially 2 days before the actual game. He didn't really get to take meetings with Mario Cristobal. He had to do a crash course to prepare. And if you watch College Game Day, his voice was already starting to go during College Game Day.
Sure.
He sounded like he was under the weather. And then by the time the game rolled around, I heard, because I was at the game, I couldn't hear the broadcast, that his voice was kind of wearing it.
Oh, my God. So Mike doesn't know what I'm about to play for him in a number of different ways, because I did call one of the things that we're about to find for you the single worst touchdown call I've ever heard in all my time listening to sports, even as I find it understandable
Just to be clear, you reached out to Reese Davis because you wanted to talk about your thoughts of him having the worst touchdown call in the history of the sport.
I wanted to talk, Mike. I wanted to talk about this call here, Mike. I'm going to tell the audio audience when the score is in this touchdown. Mike hasn't seen this. Mike, you're going to be amazed by this touchdown call that starts the comeback for the University of Miami when they're down 35-10. Score.
Whistles. And they signal the touchdown.
Oh, poor guy.
Damian Martinez gets it in.
Oh, poor guy.
Whistles.
In his defense, that didn't feel like it was any sort of meaningful touchdown in the moment. It was probably met with a proper amount of fanfare.
35-17.
It didn't feel like that was going to matter.
You say in his defense. I'll say in his defense. Have you any idea what it's like to learn 3 hours beforehand? Hey, you have to know all of the University of Miami's offensive linemen. You need to know the names of all of these numbers out there. It was like Boog calling South Korean baseball games during the pandemic from a closet in his house.
I just want to hear Reese talk more.
Martinez, and then the flip out, and Arroyo gets into the end zone.
That's a good play.
Elijah Arroyo.
First rounder.
And the game is tied.
That was like the big tying call.
Well,
right
that was it. Okay.
Mike, is that proper enthusiasm? Or
no, he didn't. He didn't exactly meet the moment.
The game is tied.
He was totally exhausted.
That's the game-winning drive.
And the game is tied.
Whistles.
Tied. And I'm tired.
Third biggest comeback
The game is tied.
in history.
Sounds like the away team broadcaster tonight.
He was broken at the
And the game is tied.
So Billy's
game.
enjoying the Bob Costas
No, I'm
comeuppance.
not. No, I'm not enjoying it. I would not root for someone else's downfall. That's not in my nature.
What?
I'm just reporting the news as I see it. People are not happy with what's going on.
I like his voice on baseball. I don't care if he's making mistakes. Like Bob Costas for me means your game is a big game, and I just like hearing his voice on baseball. I can deal with the mistakes. I like his voice.
Like
I
the
Al
Michaels effect, kind of the way, because people throw that at him
Right.
sometimes, not interested in it, but his voice, though, it just hits.
Yes.
Stugotz, though, I'm telling you that and this has been happening for a couple of years now, I have not seen social media reaction like this for any other broadcaster. Not of this level of passion and rage and just general fury. And it's weird for me to see it directed at this particular broadcaster because the career has been impeccable. The career of doing this, it's been hard to watch how angry it is that people are getting that he would deign to desecrate their beloved sport by calling it less well than they would like it called.
I would guess, though, there's a number of people who are criticizing Bob who don't care about Bob's history, didn't hear Bob in his prime, don't know how good of a broadcaster Bob Costas was. I'm feeling like this is a good time to put in our annual request for Costas. What do you think? Get him on the show, huh? I mean, we get him once a year. You want him?
Billy, can you email him?
I don't know.
This
man.
is
I feel
not the
like
time.
Yeah,
People
this-
don't like him. They're not going to like us for having him on.
They're
By
not
the way,
gonna
did you
like
guess
that.
his middle initial? Because it is Q.
I think we may have done a similar bit
Yeah, we
about
did that,
Bob
yeah.
Costas in the queue in the past, if I'm going back. And that just, one of those things got activated in the back of my brain that somehow I knew his middle name was with a Q. Quinlan.
I'm also pretty sure we did the what's the origins of nothing to sneeze at.
Who, Quinlan?
Well put.
Is that family name?
We could ask him if Stugotz
Well, no, it's
puts in our annual request. It would be
You want him?
suspicious timing. I don't think we should do that today.
Oddly enough, we did the nothing to sneeze at thing because of Reese Davis.
Wow.
So how about
that's
that?
right.
Full circles, yo.
Look at that.
Because his call after Lou Holtz sneezed during a highlight was to say that highlight was nothing to sneeze at. And Lou Holtz's sneeze sounded exactly like you imagined it would, like an old Rutabaker from the 1920s honking at an intersection.
Rutabaker's always going to make me laugh.
Every time.
Put it on the poll. Is old Rutabaker redundant? Because I do think once I've said Rutabaker, the old is baked in.
Anything that Henry Rowan Gardner's manager called him in The Colt Classic Rookie of the Year is okay in my book.
The Q as a middle initial is the most obnoxious way to go, is it not?
Gardenhoser.
Rosenberger.
I want to ask you guys this as it relates to some of the blowback that Bob Costas is getting, because I recognize it, because I too can appear to be sanctimonious and I can give off a whole lot of strident or I know more than you. So I sort of recognize when this kind of personality type isn't liked very much. But when you think of broadcasters who you enjoy criticizing when they fail or when they stumble around because you think they're giving off "I'm better than you," what's the list of those media members? Stugotz is an everyman. He connects with people because he is like fandom. Who are the broadcasters who are giving off, "I want to hate that person because I think there's a pomposity baked into the broadcast that I don't like"? And so I particularly enjoy, Whittingham has some of this. I enjoy when Whittingham fails or stumbles because he knows how good he is at it. And so when he's less than good at it, I enjoy him being humanized and humble.
Those might just be the two.
Quinlan, Irish origin.
So it's Bob and Whittingham. I mean,
Costas is for sure on the top of that list because then he starts like sermonizing about this and that. And you're like, buddy, just get to the ball. I'm like, what's the count? It's 2-1 count. Come on.
Let's play Reese Davis reacting with good ad-lib to exactly the way you imagined Lou Holtz's cartoon sneeze would sound.
Also mentioned Amir Abdullah. Now, Marshall, usually it's all Rakeem Cato who did throw a touchdown pass in his 40. Devin Johnson put up 272 yards. That's a Marshall record. Nothing to sneeze at.
Craziest part about that clip is recognizing that Amir Abdullah is still in the NFL.
Crazy, yeah. That is Reese's finest moments. I mean,
I want to play the whole thing again because my favorite part of that, okay, I think most of us would say the best part of that is clearly the sneeze. But my favorite part of that is that I hear it coming 2 seconds early, and so do you. You hear,
the inhale.
You hear him winding up and trying to keep it down, and the old man can't keep it down. So you hear the escalation. It's a little extra loud because he's unsuccessfully putting it down.
Also mentioned Amir Abdullah. Now, Marshall, usually it's all Rakeem Cato who did throw a touchdown pass in his 40. Devin Johnson put up 272 yards. That's a Marshall record. Nothing to sneeze at. Throw a touchdown pass in his 40.
Massive buildup. I mean,
we've all been there. Where it's like
we've all been there.
Actually,
yeah.
Reese's line isn't that impressive when you consider he had 4 seconds to prepare for it.
Rakeem Cato, who did throw a touchdown pass in his 40. Devin Johnson put up 272 yards. That's a Marshall record. Nothing to sneeze at.
We can agree, right? We can agree that all of that was made worse by Lou Holtz trying to prevent it, correctly. That the sneeze wouldn't have been the disaster it was if he had just let it go from the start instead of trying to put it back in the cage. One more time.
Rakeem Cato, who did throw a touchdown pass in his 40. Devin Johnson put up 272 yards. That's a Marshall record. Nothing to sneeze at.
Pressure really built up there.
And then we reached terminal velocity.
His ears definitely popped.
No doubt, but I think Dan is right. It's him trying to stifle it, which is what caused him to sneeze. If he just let it go, it would have been a benign sneeze, if there was a sneeze at all. I mean,
I got to say, it's a bit of an upset here that in our crew of people, and I think I could say this mathematically, empirically, in the history of our show, Jessica has sneezed more than everyone else on our show's history combined. And she's a violent sneezer. Like, it's not, it is not a soft sneeze. It is something that comes from a different land and arrives here louder each time and echoes throughout the studio.
Thank you. I won't do what you tell me. Thank you. I won't do what you tell me. Thank you. I won't do what you tell me. Thank you. I won't do what you tell me. Thank you. I won't do what you tell me. Thank you. I won't do what you tell me. Thank you. I won't do what you tell me. Thank you. I won't do what you tell me. Thank you. I won't do what you tell me.
Thank you. I won't do what you tell me. Thank you. I won't do what you tell me.
It's a good song.
I won't do what you tell me. Thank you. I won't do what you tell me.
You guys mentioned something being pressurized and terminal velocity. You will be relieved to learn that I did find a single thing funny yesterday as tornadoes swirled all over the place and as fear gripped Florida. Here is Stugotz, former University South Carolina quarterback Stephen Garcia, waving the cock flag for everyone to see. Thank you guys for blurring out his butt. I really thought it was important. I thought the comedic effect of having his butt was better than a blurred out butt.
We have partners, Dan. There were children here yesterday. Come on, let's be grown up.
Also, Ethan's ability to know that was Stephen Garcia by looking at his ass was interesting.
Well, you guys thought that was just a South Carolina fan, and I said I'm pretty sure that that's Stephen Garcia. And then Ethan and the Fuentes brothers stopped talking about historic Mets home runs long enough to say, no, that is Stephen Garcia. That's clearly the former South Carolina quarterback. I can recognize him from his ass crack.
How'd you know? I mean,
well, it was his Twitter account that he put it on, so that's what that's what I recognize.
Sure, yeah.
And,
cheater.
I spent a lot of time memorizing the ass print of Stephen Garcia since he was playing.
He did play for 12 years.
Yeah, that's right. That's a proud Hispanic ass. I know all of the Hispanic quarterbacks. I know when there's a Martinez running about for Nebraska and a Fernando running around for California. There aren't that many of us.
You're not one of them.
I'm not one of what?
You said there aren't many of us. Like you're one of the Hispanic quarterbacks.
I'm just Hispanic. I meant us as in Hispanics.
I was just making sure you realized you weren't a quarterback ever.
I hadn't realized that. Thank you, Stugotz. I appreciate you always being helpful in that regard.
You got it.
Can you guys get for me some baseball coverage that I believe the audience will enjoy here? This is Colin Cowherd's show. I want you guys to listen to this here, and I want you guys to tell me if there's anything about this analysis that stands out to you. It's always good when the big major media players decide to give a little shine to the sports outside of basketball and football. Let's listen to Colin Cowherd and Jason McIntyre here breaking down some baseball.
Let me tell you something. Come on. The Mets.
I know.
And the Padres.
They're juicy and fun.
That is a juicy World Series.
But we've been waiting on Dodgers Yankees for.
You know who we're not mentioning? The Royals. They'll probably win the whole thing.
Stop it.
Put it on the poll. Is Mets Padres a juicy World Series?
That would be exciting, Dan. They're playing well.
Gas bag of the week.
Congrats, Colin.
Wow. What's wrong with the take? I don't get it.
Who doesn't want to Bills Chiefs Super Bowl?
It's a great
alignment right there.
It's never happened before.
That's what I'm saying.
Never happened before.
It is unlikely to happen, I don't think. I wonder today if people are criticizing the Phillies instead of celebrating the Mets. I do think it's unusual that not that long ago, Stugotz, they were up 3-2, looking like they were going to go to the World Series. Philadelphia was a baseball town that felt like it was filled with uncommon electricity. And then since then, they have lost in 5 of their 6 playoff games that they've lost. They've scored all of 8 runs, even though Bryce Harper is one of the best postseason players ever. Philadelphia has fallen apart in a way that has made their fans very angry. We have some video and some audio of fans in Philadelphia getting angry, but I really do want to spend more time celebrating the Mets than enjoying the defeat of Philadelphia. But they are going a little nuts in Philadelphia. Play that, please.
So there's a couple low points in my life. My dog passing away and them getting a grand slam. The grand slam took the cake.
Courtney O'Neill was not a fan of that outcome.
I feel like I might either check into AA, therapy, or an institute of some sort because this is crap. It's full of crap.
And she wasn't the only one. One woman told us she literally drove all the way up the East Coast just to see the Phillies lose.
I had back pain from the hurricane maybe 6 or 7 hours ago. I drove 21 hours up here, and I came here. My first stop, I had no sleep. No sleep. I'm here from the hurricane, and my Phillies are losing. I don't know what else to say.
And 2 guys we met had to walk home in nothing but overalls with Phillies logos.
We're fed up. We're fed up. We had such great expectations, and now we're just stuck.
I've already hit the fist
stage of grief. It's called acceptance. Acceptance that this team will not win for the next 5 years probably.
But Courtney hasn't reached that acceptance phase just yet.
And I want everyone gone. I want the bartenders gone. I want Xfinity gone. I want my best friend gone. I want them all gone. This is bullcrap.
Tony, what are you laughing
I
about?
want the bartenders gone.
I want Xfinity gone.
My dad was giving me crap for rooting for the Mets, and it's just like, he's like, what about the Tigers? And it's kind of like Stugotz's thing with the March Madness. Like, the Tigers are a nice story, but I don't want the Tigers in the World Series.
Right.
Like, the Mets are the perfect example right now because
Yes.
they have the stars and they have that, like, good vibes going right now. So the Mets are the team to root for here.
You want
Get out of here with the Tigers.
You want big brands in the biggest games, of course. You want Mets Yankees. You want Mets Dodgers. If you can get it in the NLCS, that's what you want. I mean,
I think people would want Dodgers in the World Series over the Mets.
No, I'm with you. Otani's a fun story too, but it's really just like my dad was making the case, and I know it could be Tigers versus the Mets, but it's just like I'm done with the Tigers. Nice story. You made your hot run. Enough with you.
You must have hated last year's World Series then.
Yeah.
Rangers in Arizona?
Well, thanks for telling me because I forgot.
Yikes. Just finding out.
I'm rooting for Padres Mets.
Is that when Joe Carter hit that home run?
I had both of those jokes lined up, but we had 10 seconds left in the segment. I know that Mike and Stugotz every once in a while will spend in a moment that's a bit disorienting to me every time it happens, whether it's on the air or off the air. It feels like a bit of a short-circuiting in our systems when all of a sudden Mike and Stugotz are volleying back and forth 9 straight minutes on tennis. Just can't talk enough about tennis and generally talk about the same things in tennis, which is the run of these 3 Michael Jordans at the same time fighting each other in tennis so that none of them could actually be Michael Jordan because the other one was Michael Jordan. The 3 of them are Spider-Man memes pointing at each other.
Well, that 3 that you talk about, Nadal, Federer, Djokovic, has become 1 because Nadal has announced his retirement at the end of this season. He has won 14 French Open championships. Roland Garros will not be the same, I am telling you right now. And I would argue, Dan, that Djokovic is the Michael Jordan of that sport. I would tell you that he is probably.
I would not put him appreciably ahead of Federer in a way that remembers his legacy as there's Michael Jordan and then we're arguing about all the others for distant second place. Nadal is retiring today, and I do want to celebrate for a moment the bronze medalist of this era because around here, Greg Cody and Stugotz have made fun of going to litigation to win a bronze medal at the Olympics. But being the 3rd best of an era in any other culture other than one that says there's one winner and everyone else is the first loser makes Nadal someone who should be celebrated for all time, even though he is the 3rd best in his generation.
I mean, it's a great debate. I would say Djokovic, by the record of Grand Slams, by the earnings, he's number 1.
Gold medal.
Yeah. Federer, I think, got fat off of an easier era while these guys were kind of getting onboarded. So I think he boosted a lot of his credentials during what was a bad time, an in-between phase of eras. And Nadal, you can make the argument, when healthy, he was the most talented and best at his top form. That would be my argument.
Only on clay, though.
No, I would say no. Because if you remember Wimbledon when Roger Federer was at the top of his game on that grass surface, what Nadal did in that tournament was incredible. The thing with Nadal is you can't ever really say if he were healthy because that only happened very early in his career where he looked destined to be the greatest of all time, where he was very clearly that much better than Federer. The injuries popped up as Djokovic just went next level on him. But I would rank Joker, Nadal, Federer, primarily because Federer got all of his earnings really in a bad era, and then once Nadal and Djokovic were there, it was a lot harder for Federer. But they were all really great, and like you said, they're Spider-Man memes pointing at one another. And we should probably honor Andy Murray too, because when he was at his best, those guys pushed him to his absolute physical limits because his body broke down.
He's the guy who got left behind, by the way.
He is, yes. But when he won Wimbledon, he was in the teeth of that era, and he had to be the best guy for that major tournament. So we'd be remiss in not mention him.
Dan is right, though. Nadal did win a lot at the French Open, but he also won on every surface. He won Wimbledon, he won the U.S. Open, he won Australian Opens.
But it was 14 on clay.
14. Well, he's the greatest clay player of all time.
Irrefutable. Yeah. And he might not be, when it's all said and done, he might not be the greatest Spaniard.
I will say of this era, right, one of the more impressive things that I can say about this era is just how rare it is for the greatness to be so great that the 3 guys we're talking about are as all-timers are household names in America, when the only other time that I can remember 3 guys like this fighting at the top of this sport is when it was McEnroe, Connors, and Borg, and you needed 2 of them to be American in order to get America to be that kind of interested. The fact that it became a global game and these international players were the ones dominating it and becoming household names here because no Americans could come close to what it is that they were doing.
I think the only American to win a Grand Slam title during their run was Roddick, U.S. Open, and he won 1 major, and I think that's it. Yeah.
Also pushed himself to like a miracle Wimbledon final, I recall, against Federer. When everyone thought Roddick was done. And Roddick was kind of at his peak in the era that Federer really got the most wins. But look, Rafa Nadal exists in a very unique space in that he is both Michael Jordan and also kind of Grant Hill, in that, man, this guy was incredible. I can't imagine how much better he'd be if his body didn't start failing him. But his body started failing him in part because of his aggressive style. In just watching those three, there's no question who's the hardest on their body in terms of playing style. And also the surface that he excelled at, the injuries that he sustained are primarily from the surface he excelled at. So it was a bit of a catch-22.
When we're talking about greatness, though, Stugotz, the mind bleep of legacy stuff when you're talking about people who are this great is Nadal was absolutely made better by the fact that these were the two human beings he was always chasing in that incredibly lonely sport. But his legacy will be remembered as less good than it could have been because he had to play against those two players all the time and was often losing to them.
But that's the case for all three, right? Like, if you take any one of them out of the equation, the other two win more. And so,
but Mike is saying of Federer because Djokovic and Nadal were sort of chasing and younger, and Federer was winning during a time. I think of Federer because he wasn't playing against them,
right,
as having a more dominant, sustained period than either one of them because he didn't have to play against them when he was dominating in his youth.
Yeah, and there were a bunch of guys that tried to step up to the challenge. I remember Del Potro beat Roger Federer in a U.S. Open, and he's another guy whose body failed him. There were so many people. There were so many cheating scandals because guys tried to push their body to make it to that point. I'd say that era in men's tennis is the most trying time in sports history from a mental aspect. What those guys put each other through mentally to be better, to push their bodies to limits thought unimaginable. Guys did not play tennis this late into their careers, and they were just kind of what Tom Brady did in changing the math to everybody. Like, I guess 44-year-old quarterbacks can be elite now.
But imagine if there were three Tom Bradys, because the thing that's amazing about their era is that the thing to me that stands out is I'm going to have a hard time finding another sport where there are three of them and you're like, I don't know how much better one of them is than the other, and I put all three of them as all-timers. Michael Jordan separated himself.
He did.
Every time he was playing a championship, Michael Jordan was separating himself. Tom Brady separated himself from everybody.
None of these guys could. Tiger separated himself from Phil and the rest of the
Serena
field.
Williams separated herself.
Yes.
Like there wasn't a competitor. There weren't three Serena Williams.
No, but with tennis, Dan, because they play on different surfaces and there are different generations. Like Federer had to go through. I think when he started his career, Sampras was still around. And he was still taking on Agassi and like Stefan Edberg and stuff. And then it morphed into, he played till he was like 40.
I do think that Djokovic is starting to separate himself from the group in that he has the record. He just won a really impressive gold medal at the Olympics, and he's still doing it against the new guys that are coming after him. He did it against Federer. He did it against Nadal. And now he's doing it against Alcaraz.
But it's mild separation. Like Dan is right about that. There is Jordan and everyone else. There is Brady and everyone else.
He's not going to go backwards in the career earnings and the Grand Slams. He's not going to go backwards, and he already has that over two guys that aren't winning anymore. Now it's Alcaraz that has him in his sights.
Let me ask you this as it relates to three people fighting for the same throne. Did you guys see that as it started not that long ago as Drake, J. Cole, and Kendrick Lamar, but now, not since, Old Town Road has a song been the longest running number one song on the Hot Rap Songs chart history than Not Like Us by Kendrick Lamar. How much more thorough of a separation do you need between three people who were regarded as largely the same thing, and then one of them, in answering the other one in beef, produces a song for all time that nets him the Super Bowl halftime show?
I guess there was a brief moment in time where it was Magic, Bird, and Jordan aided by just not only his greatness but his age, hitting his prime as those guys were kind of on the downswing. He really separated himself from that discussion and basically became a one-man league as he just dominated the conversations into June.
Are you saying now Kendrick has become Jordan?
I mean, he's having a Jordan-like year, is
But,
he not?
but Mike, because we've seen the best of Kendrick, right? Good Kid, Mad City. We've seen Damn. We've seen him put out classic albums.
He just released his biggest song ever, though. And
sure, but like now looking forward, is this like the crescendo of Michael Jordan 97 where he pushes off Russell and hits the J and like, all right, now we know, or is it there's still some left in the
You
tank?
might be talking to the wrong guy because I'm like Peter Rosenberg in that to me he was my favorite MC ever before this whole thing with Drake. I would have told you that he was the GOAT beforehand.
We all know Cole stepped back and said, I don't want any of the smoke, but then on another song said, I'm the GOAT off of features. And I was like, well, wait a second.
Who's Larry Bird in this?
J. Cole, probably.
Yeah. His back gave out.
So third? Yeah.
So third, yeah.
I mean,
he's icing his back?
Yeah.
The thing is, Drake has so much catalog. He has so much success.
Drake is magic.
Drake's
I don't
only
know if
Drake's only actually been hurt when it comes to optics. And public support. You can't publicly be a Drake guy, but if you look
Only
at the
Kevin Durant is.
Yeah, but if you look at the streaming metrics, Drake
He's
was
goated.
not hurt by this. His audience has not really dissipated. His social currency certainly has, and he's become a meme in that he's gotten smoked in this so much so he's kind of laying low.
But he's been
comparatively.
memed his entire career. He's been memed. So like this is not something new to him. Like he's always been the butt of
It's
jokes.
an excellent
and
point.
rolls with it.
That's why he's so well poised to actually even survive this. Like because most people are like, well, what'd you expect? Drake to actually win the thing?
Right. I think it's the kid stuff that's the harmful stuff there. The implications that he's making about Drake.
But again, easy implication to just lob up and everybody's like, oh, grenade. Kind of harder to prove in a court of law.
Yes. I don't think that this is how we're beefing, though. We're not beefing in the court of law.
He's presently not in custody, so there's that.
I wanted to bring something up here, Stugotz, and I will leave it alone in a second because today and the last couple of days have been a bit disjointed because of the weather calamity that is headed this way and has ravaged now St. Petersburg and Sarasota. And I don't know what information you guys are getting on how bad it is, because it went from Category 5 to Category 3 as it slowed down and arrived at the West Coast. And the worst of it was able to be avoided because you did not have the 15 feet of sea surge, of storm surge in Tampa, which would have consumed Tampa and would have gotten the nation's attention more than I think this, Stugotz. I don't know how much the nation is paying attention to what happened in Asheville, North Carolina, even as bodies were found in trees.
Right.
And I don't know if I don't make it a city that you have heard of necessarily. If I don't make it Tampa and I make it Sarasota and I'm just showing you catastrophe, I don't know how the nation at large receives the following information. 17 inches of rain in St. Petersburg. That's a third of what they usually get for a year. You had a crane fall into a building. You've got a boiled water effect that's going to be problematic for a lot of people at midnight because you had to shut off drinking water because a pipe burst. I said earlier that at the time I was watching, I imagine it's more now, more than 2 million people had lost power, and that's going to be an overwhelming onslaught for Florida Power and Light. You all, I am assuming, know what it feels like to have stuff just rotting in your refrigerator for days and the inconvenience of all of that. To not have, you don't necessarily know how much your life gets altered by not having power until you've lost power. I don't think it's something we're all thinking about, but in some places humid and swampy as Florida, a lot of things are going to go bad that make your life feel like it's going a little bad by not being able to have drinking water or power for a while.
You're asking, does the rest of the country care if it's a city they haven't heard of? I think they care, but Dan, it's impossible to care unless you've been through one of these. And we have all
I don't think it's impossible to care.
Let me rephrase that, because you're right. It's not impossible to care unless you've been through it. But if you have been through one of these, you know what these people are going through right now in Tampa. And so I think it's, I know 4 people have been reported dead. And I think it's going to be a lot worse and a lot more than we anticipate, unfortunately, because there are places, again, during the coverage they can't take you. You can't see it. So we don't know the true damage yet.
One of the things, though, because we were talking yesterday about the gentleman with one leg, Lieutenant Dan, who was on a 20-foot sailboat, and I saw a couple of things happen yesterday. It wasn't just that Tampa's mayor said that if you were in an evacuation zone, you were going to die, and he was insisting on staying in the 20-foot sailboat. And some authorities in Tampa were talking about simply taking his freedom, coming in and removing him and not allowing what it is that he was doing by deciding to stay on a sailboat that he said was his only property and he wasn't going to go back to being homeless with one leg. There have now been reports because a number of people were moved by his story. Aiden Ross, the influencer, offered him a $50,000 to $100,000 boat to give him some help because a lot of people were moved by his story. But now I'm reading that he's got a number of aliases. He started a GoFundMe a few weeks ago, that he attacked a worker of some sort with a violin, which I don't even understand.
They get much worse than that.
Yeah, it's kind of
his
the tip
rap
of the
sheet.
iceberg of
His rap sheet is real bad.
He's not a good guy, apparently.
I think real bad, and then it's probably around that area. Yeah. It's bad and it's substantive.
But he's a digital creator who's now getting a great deal of help.
He's not a digital creator. He was just found by the internet.
I don't even know if he has a phone.
He's found by the internet, and he's not going to become Hawk Tua because of what's in his past, which is terrible stuff.
Yep, a violin.
A digital creator?
That
guy is running analog.
Let's check in with him here. We've got an update. I don't know what the other bad stuff is. I thought that 4 aliases and a violin beating was the worst that it got.
No, it's underage stuff. Yeah, assaults. There was one. Alleged kidnappings. Apparently
Lighting
tried to
people on
light
fire.
somebody on fire. It's all really bad
check
stuff.
in.
It seems like a bad person to give fame and money.
Yeah, we should probably not further platform it.
Yeah, let's play that video.
And Lieutenant Dan here. How'd it go? How'd the night go?
It was a little rough till about 11:30. I repositioned the boat, and I was heading into the wind, and I slept like a baby from 12:30 to 5 o'clock this morning. I woke up twice to pee. That was it. But other than that, I mean, it's been a great night. I just smoked half a joint. I'm high. I'm watching all the people run around like crazy because of all the water. The water went up. It was up to here last night. It was over the pole.
There's the boat still standing.
I mean, I believe me, I got battered against the tire. But other than a couple of scuff marks on the side, my boat's in better shape now than it was before because it got washed. So, I mean, everything's a plus. It's a win-win all the way around.
What'd you learn from this experience?
Not a damn thing.
I want to ask you guys how much damage is actually done as the country and the world can argue about anything and politicize anything. How much damage is done when one side is talking about how our political influence is being corrupted by oil and oil's money, has harmed the climate, and then on the other side you have climate deniers who are saying that Tampa's mayor is a fearmonger when she says if you stay in an evacuation zone you're going to die. And this guy not only doesn't receive any harm from staying in a sailboat as the waters rise in the most dangerous areas of Tampa, but gets rewarded in every way by what his fame brings to him as some of this happens and people yell at each other back and forth about climate change and deny that climate change is a real thing.
I don't even think his time in the spotlight actually got him rewards because he's been doxxed and everyone now knows about his past, and I'm sure people that committed, unless they decide that he's paid his debts to society, are probably going to move away from that one.
But his boat is clean.
He also admits that I would have been in real bad shape if I didn't have Good Samaritans help me. And it was, you ever watch Shark Week and they focus on like a death-defying marine biologist that's doing all sorts of dangerous things, and you ever think to yourself like, wait, how are they getting this footage? There's someone that's more brave that is documenting the brave person that does not have the same kind of protections that even the person that they're focusing on. That's what was happening last night with everybody just on foot occasionally checking in with Lieutenant Dan. Hey, are you okay? Yeah. He's at least like sheltered somewhat in his boat. There are so many people. Like I saw at least 7 different content creators go over to him and check in on him through the night.
There was also a dog that someone just sort of left tied up to something, and you never know the places that someone is going to connect or something is going to connect with humanity, because a lot of people took an enormous interest all of a sudden in just a dog that had been abandoned and tied up in an area that had been evacuated. But my question to you guys is, I know that people don't want me talking about this. I know that it is something unpleasant, but when all of this happens, and Stugotz comes in here today and says to me, you're rooting for something bad to happen, when I am not rooting for anything bad to happen. I'm just scared at all the bad that is happening all over the globe with things like this. And when you're disconnected from it, Stugotz, because I don't know how many people listening to this are thinking about Asheville, connecting with Asheville, which was the one before this. But if you just think that these are common storms and not the new normal that is going to continue to bring things that are worse and worse than this, and if we don't do anything about it and our leadership fails because it's all bought by the oil money, what are you supposed to do other than feel helpless and hopeless? And am I better off just not mentioning it? Just keep it moving at all times. Stay in the playground. Keep talking about Francisco Lindor. Don't have any real world stuff spill into the sandbox. Just ignore that the country is fighting over the facts of climate change, and you have people just denying that this stuff is happening even as it happens.
I don't think you're going to like my answer to this.
I mean, I am asking you the question. I don't know what the correct answer is. I know people don't want me to talk about it.
It's not that you're fearing something, a city falling into the ocean. I say that, but I say that jokingly, and I love you. Dan does not root for that, but it would take something like that. If you want the entire country to start paying attention to this stuff, it would take something dramatic like that for everyone to start paying attention.
Okay, but what I'm saying to you is this stuff is happening all over the globe. It's just happening in places that, for whatever reason, don't resonate the way the guy on the sailboat does and the way the dog does. Even as bodies are being found in trees in Asheville, and you're like, that's not in any way normal. There was no warning for that. A city goes from the day before they don't know anything's going to happen to waking up and there are bodies in trees. Like, and I guess it's easier to ignore it. I know you guys don't want to talk about it. Every time I talk about it, I just see the room drift away from me. Like, you guys might as well float off to sea, because I know you don't want to talk about it either. Let's have fun with it then. Let's just go in with this weathercaster, Paul Goodlow, and see how he brings sports to weather.
You might still be in the eye right now. There's a lot more to go. I think back to, the Atlanta Falcons first half Super Bowl winner. We know what happened to the second half when the Patriots came back to life. So do not sleep on the second half of Milton, and we're definitely concerned now.
That's the way I should do it?
Yeah.
I get what he means by that. Like, that analogy hits with me. I'm like, yep, this is not over. This
dumbed it down. Yeah.
Propped it up. Spoke to the layman. If you didn't understand that I'm surrounded by storm and death, how about I just give you a halftime score?
28-3. A little less Milton in that update, you know what I mean? Like, you mentioned the Patriots, then Drake May's starting. And then like, whoa, okay, where are we going with this, buddy?
Drake May is starting.
Yeah.
I believe they're throwing him in.
Yeah.
It's a bad team.
I watched that as it happened live, and the studio host takes it back. The meteorologist that they have kind of QBing everything is like, he's absolutely right. The second half could be way more entertaining. I'm like, entertaining? What are we doing here?
Trying to get you to stick around.
Do you think when these weather people are like at a spot where it's not raining on them, like, can you go find some rain or something? I'm looking for a shot here.
What's Anderson Cooper's deal?
Why was he out there?
Like, because he obviously said he wanted to be. There's no way Anderson Cooper is being sent out there unless Anderson Cooper's requesting to go out into the hurricane.
He
loves ball.
He was stuck behind a tree for hours, though.
Yeah,
I mean,
Andy, buddy. Go inside. Stay in New York. You don't need to be putting yourself at risk for no reason.
A few times a year, he likes to get out there, get in the field.
Yeah,
it's
but
not
like,
his game, though.
It is, though. He does it every year with a bunch of He if a big story happens, Anderson will go out there.
Unnecessarily so. Also, for the first time ever, I had someone texting me Jim Cantori hate yesterday. Saying Jim's kind of lost his fastball. Jim wasn't really in the thick of it anymore. Jim wasn't even on ground level. He was like on the second or third story.
Garage.
He was in a parking garage.
He was like on the third story of a parking garage. And like, old Jim Cantori would chain himself to a stop sign, and we'd see what was what.
Exactly.
New Jim Cantor, he put on a baseball helmet that they'd get at like the local Dick's Sporting
They've
Goods or
given him
whatever.
baseball helmets,
and then we'd see like how fast the coconut hits him in the head, and then and then we know how serious this storm is. This Jim, third story of a parking garage, and we're like, oh, I don't know. Jimmy.
Were you there when the transformer blew though?
Yeah, and he
It
ran
blew live.
he ran from it instead of towards it.
It's like, wow, that's eerie. It's one of the most eerie sounds I've ever heard.
The loudest sound he ever heard. But Billy is right. Like Jim Cantore used to make you feel like he was putting his life on the line. He did, whether he was or not is up for debate.
Oh,
but he used to feel like his life was on the line.
Hold on, you don't think he was?
He was doing it.
By the way, this isn't Billy. I'm just relaying to you what was texted to me private. I'm just reporting here.
Right.
He was in the puddle several yards away from a transformer blowing.
Puddle, though, before it used to be he'd be in the ocean.
Right.
I will say to you.
He'd go to Tampa Bay and he'd where's the water? I don't know. I'm going to walk far enough until I find it into the bay. And it's like, Jim, don't do that, buddy. The water's going to come back. That's how these things work. But he'd go in there.
Billy, you tuned in late because he began that particular adventure on the first floor of that parking garage and then moved up because the water was rising to the second and the third floor.
Old Jim would find a basement, you know what I mean, in that situation.
He kept yelling, it's like a real wash tub out there, which I didn't understand. And at one point he said, as the crow flies, which I didn't understand what that even meant when he used the expression.
To Mike's point earlier, no one talks about Cantor's cameraman. Like, he's got someone with him in all these spots, and Cantor gets all the credit.
Right, like Scottie Pippen. Yeah.
Here is not really like Scottie Pippen. I feel like Scottie Pippen got a lot of credit.
Undeserved.
He got a lot of touches.
Let's just check in with some B-roll here of Anderson Cooper being hit by debris. Unfortunately, we do not have the sound because the sound is what's funniest here. I don't know what he got hit by. It feels like the cameraman just threw a notebook at him. I don't.
Oh my God, that's Anderson.
What are we doing here?
I thought that was Cantor. They sent Anderson into that. I thought he would have just been on the outskirts.
Man, Anderson loves ball.
Even he's like, this is a lot.
Yeah.
This guy's a billionaire heir. Yeah. And he's just out there loving ball.
That's also probably why he enjoys doing this, because he's a billionaire heir and doesn't really have anything else to do besides doing exciting things.
Like Richard, this is basically
a nightly show.
Richard Branson.
2 shows.
This is just for him to get his.
He has
his
a child.
kicks.
Gloria Vanderbilt is his mother. What is he being hit by there? It seems like it's
looks like a clipboard.
It looks like a notebook. It does look
It's
like
a sign.
I think it's a sign.
It's a hurricane. It could be
It's
anything.
a styrofoam piece.
That's a
Yeah,
great
it's a-
point,
Thank you.
Stugotz.
it could. He's not wrong.
This is Todd Bowles' play sheet.
Dan,
That does look like a play sheet.
the crow flies is to take the most direct route between 2 points, because the crow always takes the quickest route.
Thank you, Tony. I appreciate you doing that off of the top of your head. I was confused. I didn't think, because Cantori was doing a lot of fists on the hips. It looked like prime Cantori. It did not look like a faded Cantori. I don't know the text.
Prime
that Billy
Cantori gets
was
in the
getting.
rafters of the trough.
So you guys won him in like 6 feet of storm surge.
Honestly,
Yes.
HGH. I'm gonna come out and say it.
I mean, Cantori never used to wait for the
He's got-
storm. He used to go meet the storm.
Yeah.
I
Got the
mean,
Bezos thing going.
Right.
Like, yeah, okay, you got money.
He
Where'd
was
you go?
in 3 feet of storm surge, and then he moved up a parking garage floor. He did begin what started out as a dry parking garage. I saw it escalate on him. He was in water that was above his knees at one point, and then he fled the premises to go upstairs in the parking
I want to
garage.
ask Mike a question, because we were watching Brian Norcross, obviously legendary meteorologist also. Mike, I want to bring in your expertise here. Brian Norcross, is he taking some PEDs for the salad, or
What do you mean?
Ridiculous.
Why are you doing that to Norcross?
What do
I'm
you
asking,
mean?
I'm
Why
asking.
is-
asking a question.
Come on. I mean, do I even need to? Sometimes you can just test this. Like the hue is just much darker than it was in the 90s. Come on. No
All
one's
right.
hair gets darker over the course of 30
Collins
years.
got darker?
Video, please put up just all of that B-roll that I saw playing in preview of an assortment of Jim Cantori video just being in his prime. This is prime.
This is when Jim
Cantori.
Cantori was
Yes,
Jim Cantori.
This is
Yes,
this
yes.
is prime Cantori.
Before the trend.
Cantori
Climbing a
Climbing a
tree,
tree for
climbing a
funsies.
tree right now.
he would not go hide in a parking garage.
I want the clip of the guy running by him and he like kicks him.
Unnecessary.
Dude, you can tell. He takes his shirt off. He looks like J.K. Simmons.
Yeah.
Can you guys give me some more updated information? Because this is one of the few places in the modern age where news travels a little bit slower because we don't have access to the most dangerous places. What have you guys seen in terms of the worst calamity to befall the west coast of Florida here? Because the storm did lessen as it approached land. It went from a 5 to a 3, and the storm surge is one of the things that is most dangerous. But there are a lot of places that people cannot get to yet that I'm assuming have been ransacked.
Certainly the most dramatic video is that of what's coming out of St. Pete with the trop. And its roof being torn off.
And a crane falling in the middle of the city.
I was going to say the crane is probably the most actually dangerous situation over there, more dangerous than this, even though the optics, it's a sensational image of watching this cathedral of sport being torn to shreds.
That's overstated, calling that particular dump a cathedral of sport.
And the roof is a tarp.
Do they just get rid of the roof and it's just an open ballpark next year?
No, they can quickly patch it. This happened in the Metrodome where it took a couple of weeks because it's made of that material. The material was made to withstand 115-mile-per-hour winds. It's been through storms previously, but we had mentioned yesterday that it was a staging area for some responders. Thankfully, it wasn't a shelter, but there were certainly people there being staged as that all happened, and there's some pretty dramatic video there.
I have told you guys the story before. I ended up watching 20 minutes out of nowhere about world's greatest architecture. The Carrier Dome gets more snow on the roof than just about anywhere in the United States per year. And because, this is something I did not know, because of the way domes are pressurized, those roofs are fabric more than they are a material that is actually meant to withstand great winds. It's more like T-shirt fabric at the top of the Carrier Dome that keeps the dome inflated and safe and pressurized the correct way. And so I was surprised to see that footage, but when I tell you that the roof of Tropicana is something that's a fabric instead of something that's hard, you sort of understand how it is that you end up in tatters there.
A show about architecture sounds like something I would go to sleep to if I'm struggling to sleep.
Dan's night is just getting started.
Even if it's world's greatest architectural marvels.
Well, you throw world's greatest in front of anything, I'm going to check it out, but...
One of them was the Carrier Dome.
Once you get to the Carrier Dome in terms of world's greatest architecture, it's kind of this is like a season 7.
Just got AC 7 months ago.
It's not the Carrier Dome anymore. I mean,
it's a shame. Damn
Which
shame.
is weird because they had a lifelong contract. I don't know how they were able to get out of that.
Billy, do me the favor of looking this up because I think it might have been the first episode of this particular show's first season. I'm not even. Please look it up for me because I want to be either disproven in a way that's funny or have you guys disproven on just how bad a television show I was watching. Because this, I believe, was the first. It was certainly
the first. Is it just called World's Greatest Architecture? This show.
You will find it. You will be able to find this pretty easily, I think, because I believe it was the first episode of a season. I just don't know if it was the first episode of the first season or not. We will get that information for you guys shortly. In the interim, there is some quote-unquote sports news breaking from the documentary series that Netflix is doing inside the life of LeBron James and Jimmy Butler. There is some sound of LeBron James complaining about playing and only taking 2 shots in 8 minutes and complaining about a minute's restriction. But Jimmy Butler said something that I don't think anyone in Miami knew specifically, which is that his father died during the season last year, and he didn't feel like playing basketball at all. And even though his teammates, he's articulating this, needed him out there, he was saying that the grief of that was such that he felt like he was just letting down teammates by not being able to mentally compose himself in a way that dealt with grief and dealt with the death of his father. Mike has been critical of the Miami Heat media before on sort of being in the pocket of the Miami Heat a little bit. And there are places where I do believe the Miami Heat media does protect people on privacy. And this was one of them where I'm learning months later about something that I think that people knew around the team, but were actually being courteous, which is super rare in the modern media climate,
right,
and respectful to Jimmy Butler's privacy and his family. We knew he was dealing with a personal issue. We knew that it also related to his father. I don't know that we knew that it affected him this way before watching this documentary.
On the show, I knew. So, like, we were protecting him here on the show. My criticisms of Heat Media are specifically what you see on the court, but they absolutely did the right thing, as did we, when Jimmy was going through all that.
Well, how do you feel about that? What's the journalistic protocol for something like that?
It's new. It is new to me. Usually, when a player is not available to play, people will get at the roots of whatever and why ever that is. I don't find that the media is generally respectful of people's privacy, even when they ask, please respect my privacy at this personal time. I do think it's a courtesy that was extended that is the right courtesy to extend. But when I was seeing it in documentary form, it was something that was surprising to me to see for the first time, because he had been protected on something that we were talking around here, and the level of his grief is understandable. At about the same time, Stugotz, I was dealing with some of the same things, and I don't feel like I should have been at work when doing that. And Jimmy Butler was having tensions within the organization about his availability for his team, for his players. I mentioned a few different times that he was being paid $500,000 to $600,000 a game and wasn't available during that time because the contracts are guaranteed.
It's something that he was actually dealing with for a long time. And it's personally why I also stopped with the Jordan dad memes, because I knew personally like what he was dealing with there for such an extended part of his time down here in Miami. I would say that it was a really difficult situation. People knew about it, and they gave him his privacy because it was not for public consumption, and he made it clear that he appreciated the privacy there. And Jimmy hasn't often wanted to talk about his past, inviting questions about his father, invites questions about his childhood, which when we had one opportunity to interview Jimmy Butler when he was with Chicago, when he was doing something with Kellogg's, and we agreed no restrictions, but they got really testy when we started going into his background, which we thought was fair game. He apparently did not want to speak about that at all.
I lost Jimmy Butler, and he hasn't been on since, because he came on to promote a charity that was dealing with the unhoused. And I simply asked him, do you have any experience with that? Like, what is your link to this? And he just shut it down after that and didn't want to talk at all about anything, and hasn't talked to our show since.
Have you caught baseball fever like I have?
Oh, yeah.
Do you know that October baseball just smacks better than any other form of baseball? Because I sure as heck do. And I cannot wait to potentially watch this Padres-Mets World Series, the one that Colin Cowherd told me is coming around the corner.
Juicy.
But if you want to see that in person, like I most certainly do, there is one place that you should check out. Folks, I'm talking, of course, about the Game Time app. Yes, the Game Time app for me is the #1 secondary ticket marketplace out there. Why, you may ask? Because of the low price guarantee. If you find a better price out there, Game Time will match it and then some. You get panoramic seat views.
That's seat view. God, I love that.
And just with a click of a button, you get all-in pricing. That means no surprises at checkout when it comes to your final price. Game Time is just the best. Download Game Time today, and new customers can get $20 off when they use a promo code DAN. Again, that is DAN. Download the Game Time app today. Terms apply. What time is it?
Game Time.
I want to get to a Padres story in a second. Billy, did you not like that singing by Chris Cody? Why are you making faces that are unsupportive of a teammate?
No, I'm not unsupportive. I was just, caught off guard.
Yep.
I'm here. Mm-hmm. I'm the foundation of this team, I think. I like to be the support column of the team.
The rock, yeah.
That's what I try to be.
Under the weather because he's caught baseball fever.
That's true. And the sniffles. Bad time for the sniffles. Oh, flu season got me started.
You had the sniffles?
Fleasing.
I do. I powered through the first segment. I needed to blow my nose. I didn't. And then last segment, I had to. I'm sorry, gang, but I had to go blow my nose.
Baseball fever.
I did it. Yeah, I powered through. In Chicago, I thought, there's no way I'm going to make it to this show, but I did. A little Dayquil. The thing is, though, after you take the Dayquil and you make it through the big obligation, you think, I'm in the clear. But no, it's back, friend.
What are the symptoms of baseball fever?
Runny nose.
Sniffles for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Teary eyes sometimes, depending on how big the home runs are in the moments.
Mm-hmm.
Is it ever a good time to have the sniffles? Because you're saying it's a bad time to have the sniffles. Is it ever a good time?
When you have to go to a funeral that you're not really that emotional about.
That's a good answer.
Wow, great job.
Good
answer.
Family
Good
feud.
answer.
Yeah,
Bad time to have the sniffles when you're eating something spicy or eating soup.
Oh, yeah, the worst time to have the sniffles.
That'll clear you out. That'll get it all out.
No, but it's just, I understand it's ultimately good for you, but you're just dripping, and it's just like,
Some wasabi. Yeah.
This wasn't so bad.
Another symptom of baseball fever? Goosebumps.
Do you get any? Does a rash come with baseball fever? Any kind of rash?
Rash is from New York.
Get that
You
checked
can be
out.
disoriented when you have baseball fever. Like, I'm disoriented finding out that Salvador Perez is that much younger than I am.
He's 34 years old.
No, he isn't.
Liar.
You're entitled to your opinions. I'm entitled to mine. No, he isn't.
I want to get to the Padres in a second, Stugotz, but before I do that, I want to relive a time with you here that I believe to be one of the greatest times in our show's history when one person or a group of people were doing one thing.
Oh, no.
And Stugotz was doing an entirely different thing because he didn't realize what the rest of us were doing. If you remember the movie Predator, I have told you before, it's Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he is fighting an extraterrestrial that has nuclear capabilities. And it was a groundbreaking movie at the time. We obsessed over it. At one point, Stugotz was going to have Billy, one of the characters in that movie that produced, I think, 3 or 4 politicians, was going to stay at Stugotz's house because we were going to convene a watching of the movie Predator with our fans.
He was going to sleep over for not 1 but 2 nights, and I had to pick him up from the airport and drop him back off.
Sonny Landham.
Yeah.
Complicated legacy.
Not that complicated,
Yes.
really. Just kind of a legacy that was bad. And one of the things that happened in our sort of reliving of the movie Predators, I was telling you guys, and this is a spoiler alert, at one point Schwarzenegger is moving through the mud, and we are given the vantage point of the Predator, who is looking through infrared vision and clearly can't see Arnold Schwarzenegger as he is covered in mud, crawling away in great fear from something that is about to kill him.
That is indeed the movie Predator. I just want to make sure we're not being redundant.
The only reason I'm bringing this up is I don't know if in this clip that we're about to play nostalgically as part of our 20-year anniversary, if I tell the story in this clip that Arnold Schwarzenegger, while in fear for his life because he's being chased by an extraterrestrial thing, says out loud, "He can't see me." It's a dangerous situation. You don't want to be heard by this thing that can kill you, but he says out loud, and that is for my father. He did that for only my father, who may not have understood that we were viewing this through the vision of the Predator.
It would be unfortunate, but I'm kind of rooting for this behind the bit to have that word for word.
Same.
I hope so too. Let's see.
I think it does.
Let's see what we have here.
This is
behind the bit.
This is
behind the bit. This is behind
the bit. I take you back to a better time when everyone on the show cared and we all tried to be entertaining.
And I'll tell you who else wants to fight. Dwayne wants to fight.
All right.
Dwayne.
Well, then let's fight, man.
Dwayne,
Let's go, guys.
No.
Do it. Kill me. I'm here. If Dwayne wants it, kill me now. We want it.
Do it! I'm here!
Let's go.
Kill me!
They ain't scared.
Do it!
Wait a minute.
I'm right here! Kill me!
Listen, man.
Will you shut up, Stugotz? Mike,
I'm doing a thing! Stu! I'm doing a thing!
We were to play
I'm
that.
Predator!
What happened to Stugotz here?
Stugotz wasn't following the context of the segment before. We were talking about the hopelessness of the Heat being on the precipice of being eliminated in the NBA playoffs. And I had cited one of the final scenes in the movie Predator, where Arnold Schwarzenegger is daring the Predator to just end it already and just kill him.
Come on! Kill me! I'm here! Come on! Do it now! Kill me!
So we had framed that, and Stugotz loves that movie. But then I started doing it as a bit.
I was in the background screaming like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Predator, like, "Arr!" Stugotz was just like tagging along, not paying attention.
And that'll happen occasionally. You're too caught up in trying to get your own shot up that you're not realizing that there's a game going on and other people are getting their shots up. And he kept stepping on the comedy there, but it actually made it funnier than it would have came out had he laid out.
I don't get embarrassed by much, but it's that and ludicrous with the watch. I mean,
It is rare. It is rare on our show that all of us are doing one show and somebody else is doing a different show. But for Stugotz not to recognize that Mike Ryan is shouting, "Kill me," in Schwarzenegger's accent, and he is still trying to motivate like his group of athletes.
Let's go!
He's doing a motivational speech in the Heat locker room, and Mike's doing something from a jungle, from a nuclear extraterrestrial that's trying to blow up Schwarzenegger.
But at least it's not a movie we discussed for years on the show, and a movie I haven't seen 17,000 times.
Yes. Stugotz basically knows 7 movies, and that's a chunk of them right there. Predator. Yeah, our show obsessed over Predator for a while. We did a Predator watch along at a movie theater. We had it on a big projector, got people to come out there. So I had thought up until that bit he would know to lay out. He didn't, but like I said, the results were even better. People quote like I'm doing a thing still to me.
He was not thinking in the moment at all. Despite knowing the movie, liking the movie, probably was able to say quotes from the movie, but what are you going to do?
It doesn't happen very often that we're doing a different show that obviously, but to pull back the curtain on it and to have Mike Ryan yell at him as Schwarzenegger that he's doing a thing, and then to see Stugotz dissolve into his own shame, which, as he said, you don't see very often. Enjoy this because you don't get it very often. He's shameless.
Do it!
Wait a minute.
I'm right here! Kill me!
Listen, man.
Leaning into the nostalgia a little bit on our 20th anniversary. Lots of special things for you in the audience. One of those special things drops every 2 Fridays, and that's the oral history of the Dan Le Batard Show. On Friday, we dropped episode 2, being very well received. Appreciate all of that. At the end of every episode, you'll hear a supercut of clips from that era. And in episode 2, I included, you mentioned in this behind the bit, that's the second most embarrassed you've been outside of asking Ludacris about his watch because you were drunk at Shaq's birthday party.
Yeah.
And we had a remote broadcast from it.
Uh-huh.
So in episode 2, I had forgotten a clip that I wanted to put in episode 1. It's kind of, it fits enough the general timeline. So I decided in episode 2 I was going to put this in because I had rediscovered a clip in which you sound somehow more drunk than you did in that Ludacris clip. Do you remember when you saw Michael Doliak at Shaq's birthday party?
No.
Well, let's play it for the audience.
We had Michael Doliak Day.
Wow.
We had Michael Doliak Day.
Oh, my God. Hammered?
Yeah, Michael Doliak passes on an interview, and you were so offended, and you brought up, which was the right thing. It's an accurate take. We had just come off of Michael Doliak Day. Why would
we had Michael Doliak Day?
That sounds like genuine hurt from Stugotz. Like,
I was hurt.
Why wouldn't Doliak do the show with us?
We had Michael Doliak Day.
Sounds like hurt and gin and tonics.
Can you get the sound of Stugotz asking, because he's never been this drunk on air. This was 7 gin and tonics in and a midnight appearance, and this was talking to Ludacris.
How much does the watch cost, Ludacris? How much?
I don't know. I got it for free. That's a good question.
That's an indelicate question, right? You don't ask a woman what she weighs, and you don't ask a hip-hop star what his jewelry's worth, do you?
That's why he let me ask this question.
You really don't.
It's Stugotz under the breath.
Tony, had you not? You'd
No,
heard
I
this
love this.
before.
I
Yes.
love this. This is the best. Like that first, because everybody's been there. Everybody's been too drunk where they go to ask a question, they're like,
How much does the watch cost, Ludacris? How much?
I don't know. I got it for free. That's a good question.
That's an indelicate question, right? You don't ask a woman what she
Billy,
weighs,
I
and you
wanted
don't ask a
to
hip-hop
ask you
star.
what was happening here with that
Are you done with that
troublemaker
clip?
Ken Rosenthal in the Padres series. Bow-tied Ken Rosenthal is finding himself in trouble. I don't know if the rest of you have heard of this story, but Ken Rosenthal is being boycotted by the San Diego Padres, who are now tied 2-2 with the Dodgers. Do any of you know what it is that I'm talking about?
Yeah,
here?
he wrote an article that they were upset with him about an article, so they've banned him.
So this is what was in the article. He called Machado, he called him punkish for allegedly throwing a baseball at Dave Roberts, even though the footage is grainy. Machado's got a great infield arm, one of the greatest in the history of the sport. It didn't seem like he was trying to throw it very hard, but Rosenthal went after him as punkish. He went after Fernando Tatis and called him a peacock, which I didn't think was very much of an insult. It's pretty much of an accurate appraisal.
It's one hell of a broadcast partner, I'll tell you that.
And he did this, though, in an article for The Atlantic. So you've got Rosenthal as the sideline reporter who's supposed to be objective, but over here he's having opinions. And I didn't think in 2024 anybody got mad at articles anymore, or that anybody was even reading articles anymore.
Or writing them.
I'm just happy that articles are still having an impact somewhere.
You just need one person to read the article and then take a screenshot of it, and then you put it out, and then that's how you get everyone upset about it.
He also went after Profar because Profar did that thing where he reached into the stands, stole a home run, and then was playful with the Dodger crowd. But the Padres are showy. And once again, we're finding ourselves in one of these situations where somebody is protecting old school baseball sensibilities from the young players, and in this case, the young ethnic players who are now boycotting him because they like to play baseball in a way that's a little more fun. I don't understand why Fernando Tatis would get bothered by being called a peacock. He is obviously a peacock. Like, he loves to prance and swagger. He was in right field, pelvic thrusting with the right field crowd. What did you guys think, though, of the Padres uniting to say, no, that guy from a different time in terms of what media is covering us has written something, and we're not going to offer him access to our clubhouse because of what it is that he's written, even though that prevents him from doing his job?
I'm okay with the team getting together and saying we don't like how this guy covers us, even though he's part of the team or part of their broadcast team. but he writes an opinion piece in a different magazine away from the team. I don't mind if the players get together and say, hey, we don't want this guy, this old guy covering us, because it's never going to be positive. We're going to continue to celebrate the way we've been celebrating and play baseball the way we've been playing baseball, and we're never going to win with a guy like that. I'm okay with it. And by the way, Tatis is batting .500 in this series. I mean, he should be. What's wrong with being a peacock? He should act like a peacock.
The Padres are super confusing to me in that I thought they would be this last year with Blake Snell and Soto.
Right.
Blake Snell was a Cy Young winner. Soto was on their team, but they didn't have Tatis. And Tatis is, outside of Ohtani, the best player in this series.
Baseball is so weird, Dan. It's weird from this standpoint. Who cares how a player celebrates? Why does Ken Rosenthal care how a 23-year-old celebrates some of the biggest moments athletically in his life? Who cares?
Obviously, a lot of people do. A lot of people in baseball care. A lot of people protecting what they believe to be baseball's sportsmanship and sacred respecting of the opponent. I don't like the boycotting of a media member who is you've got a partnership with. Like, this is a paid partnership. It's not even a partnership like you got to be friendly and pretend to be partners. You're working with a partner here. The thing that makes it tricky about Rosenthal, he's not writing for a magazine. He's writing for a website, and it's outside of the job that he's doing, which he would never do any of that in the broadcast. He would never do any of that as part of their partnership. He's doing it for The Athletic in the written form. He's having a much stronger opinion, and he's losing his access because these specifically, the thing that I noticed about it is, it's the three Latin guys. Like, it's not any of the other, there are other showy Padres, but it's the three Latin guys that he's going after. And other people have noticed this as well. They've noticed that there are often old white sensibilities that pollute the coverage of this game.
How about Ken Rosenthal hit a baseball one time like Tatis does and see how he would celebrate?
It's a funny visual.
I mean, Jesus.
With the bow tie, yeah.
You have him in the bow tie, raking.
Always in the bow tie.
You have him. What do you got? You got him going opposite field in the bow tie?
Yeah. Aren't the Padres being a little sensitive here? I think that's pretty sensitive.
Yes.
It's just, it's kind of snowflake behavior from Manny Machado. I don't really understand it.
I think the problem with the Profar play, outside of the fact that the Dodgers threw trash on the field, is nobody knew it was an out.
There's a limit on this. You can hold the ball for like 5 seconds, and you got to show
really
me.
Well,
throw the ball into the infield, man.
Mookie hit a home run the other day, and he thought that he was robbed again and almost ran off the field before getting to second base because he thought that he was being tricked again, which would have been kind of like an interesting thing where the Padres pitcher was flat out telling him, hey, finish rounding the bases, which if I was him, I wouldn't have. I would have let him just walk right back in the dugout, then step off the mound, toss down to second base, and then there's an out and a run off the board because he was tricked. By the way, guys, I don't know if we're aware of this, but tomorrow night we have the greatest two words in sports in the divisional round. Game five.
Yeah.
A lot of caveats on the front of that, but
There
Game
really were.
5.
There really were.
But why is Ken Rosenthal pointing out these guys? He's not pointing out Jesse Winker of the Mets, who acts like a complete moron when he's playing baseball. He celebrates, over-celebrates, if that's what you want to call it. Why is he pointing out those guys?
You're not going to get Mets access, Stugotz.
I mean, I don't care, but I'm saying, why is he singling out these particular players and not the other players who, I guess, over-celebrate, for lack of better term?
I am always confused by the policing of the joy of others, but this is a showy baseball team, and I happen to like baseball teams that play with swagger and aren't afraid of Ohtani and the Dodgers. I was just interested in sort of the media story of this because it is very sensitive of the Padres. I wouldn't like to be called a punk. Punkish behavior, I understand Machado, but Peacock doesn't. I mean,
or a moron.
They should, I guess there should be a conversation, but banning someone's access, especially Ken Rosenthal's done this for quite a while. I'm sure he's not above having a conversation and clearing the air there. It just seems pretty sensitive.
Yeah, but the media's changed, man. The athletes got together, and they're like, we don't like this guy. He's writing bad stuff about us, and he's not saying it to our faces. He writes it somewhere where hopefully we don't see it, and they're like, we don't want him here.
I guess media's changed as a byproduct of all those things, but it's not really the media changing. It's a player empowerment changing. It's also how people view the media that's changing. This pretty common practice. Someone does something on the field, and someone has an opinion about it and puts out an opinion piece. That's sports, baby.
Oh, but one of the things that has changed, and it changed with the pandemic, is, and you guys have read about this, I'm guessing, the NFLPA is now saying we kind of don't want reporters in the locker room at all. This is our private space, and it's a cramped space often, and there are a lot of giant people in a cramped space. And once you allow the media in when a team has lost and is hissing and is naked, they don't want people around anymore. And I would ask you guys the question, given that we have more access to these human beings than we've ever had, given social media. We see more of their lives than we've ever had access to. When the NFLPA says the way that the media has covered us is outdated, it hurts me to say this as somebody who wants the access, but they're right. Like, it is an invasive thing for us to be able to go in right after their emotional workday and stand by their locker when they're naked, as opposed to having them come out in press conference form after they've gotten the emotion of it out and can just do something that is more rigid. But who gets hurt there, right? Because obviously the media gets hurt in its ability to do the job, but doesn't the customer also get hurt by limited access? And should we, because of what happened during the pandemic where they all realized, oh, it's nice to not have all these people up in these private spaces anymore. Who's right here?
I think it's outdated, and times change, and practices around it need to change. I'm totally fine with their stance on that. I get why they're uncomfortable with it. There really aren't many professions where you go do your job, you undress because of the physical exertion, and someone puts a microphone in your face as that's happening. I feel like we can all wait a little bit.
I think we should do that around here. I think we should start having – I think our show should end in the postgame with Stugotz with a towel around his shoulders in the locker room over there with someone interviewing him about how he thinks he did
Is
today.
he going to be naked or no?
Yeah, I think that's the way it should be, with a towel around his waist.
How'd you feel about that bad joke in the third segment? Yeah.
How'd you feel about that behind the bit when we were just sort of we were talking
undressing you?
Billy, before we get to Gerald McCoy, before we get to Pitch Clock with Jeremy, what's going on with your listener league?
Great question, Dan. So if you want to compete against not my listener league, our listener league, all of us compete in it every week. Go to dkng.co/Smirnoff. It's a $3 buy-in. It's presented by Smirnoff, the world's #1 vodka. Please drink responsibly. So you get your budget's about $50,000. I know you think, wow, I can do a lot with $50,000. You can roster an entire fantasy football team for a day for the 1 o'clock and the 4 o'clock games, and then you can kind of try to turn the 50,000 digital dollars that you obtained with your 3 real dollars into, sometimes like 450 real dollars, depending on how you finish.
Do you go for the most expensive players first, or do you start cheap and then go for the expensive guys late? I never know how to play that.
Got to build your lineup depending on rosters.
Start expensive and then just
it's a
fill in the rest.
tricky situation. I don't want to tell people my strategy because I don't want them to beat me. Even though I want you to win, I don't want you to win at my expense.
I always spend a lot on the quarterback, the running backs, because I know I have the defense, special teams coming up, and I have the kicker.
Love that cheap defense.
Yeah.
Didn't you say, though, that you went one time from being 4th in the league to like 643rd? You seem very inconsistent, your results here.
Well, that's the great thing about it, Dan, is that 1 week's failures don't carry over to the next week, but also 1 week's successes also don't carry over to the next week. So, like, I was, at one point last week, I was on the stage in Chicago. We went to Chicago also, presented by the good people of Smirnoff. I was in 7th place. I was riding high on that stage, watching my Bears. And then I fell out to like 123rd place-ish, more or less, I want to say.
Only if you would have started Alec Pierce.
Right before the show started, Tony had me remove 2 different players that I had. He's like, trust me, bro, you got to get this guy instead. And I listened to him.
Tony, you sabotaged him successfully?
100%. It cost me 2 touchdowns.
The long con, Dano.
300 yards. Absurdity. Anyway, dkng.co/Smirnoff if you want to compete against us this week.
I associate Gerald McCoy with Tampa. He's also a very good talker, so we will discuss everything going on in Tampa and football with Gerald McCoy next.